Now, I want to welcome our guest to the show, Tiffany. Hey, Tiffany. Tiffany
Hi,
Anderson.
Elaine.
It's Tiffany Anderson, and she's going to be talking to us today about the kind of stuff that happens at the Vector Department. And we want to know this because these people have been in your yard spraying poison. So you have an organic garden. It's not an organic garden anymore, and this,
It,
yeah,
it's
that's it.
called a co-op. It's called a co-op agreement, and it's an agreement between. It's a government agreement which gives the vector control every year. The vector control. First of all, they are self-insured, and so that you can find them at the Office of Self-Insured. You can find their policy, and you can see how many vector controls are actually on their joint power authority. But you are absolutely correct because with this co-op agreement, it gives us the right to enter people's property without their knowledge. Um, there are certain properties out, like in the agriculture, or even when I worked out on the islands, where I just went. I could go anywhere I wanted without asking permission. When you're going house to house, you do have to ask permission to go in the backyards. Um,
But what if no one's there? Can you just go anyway and leave a note?
No, that's not recommended because they do not want to be sued. But when we had the foreclosures and Tracy was hit pretty hard. Tracy and Stockton were hit really hard when our homes started to get foreclosed upon, and people from the Bay Area the commuters were buying the homes, and when the bubble burst, we had a just a huge amount of vacant swimming pools, and so employees did
I
start
heard about
breaking the.
that was a big
Yeah.
problem because there were deserted houses everywhere,
Oh yeah, there were vacant
abandoned
houses. It was
houses.
like a ghost town in some areas. Yeah. But the planes, no matter what, the planes are still, when they have the go to fly their planes, which they do pretty frequently. That it doesn't pick and choose whose property they're spraying over. So even if you think you're organic, there's drift.
Yes, and
So,
that's really the sad thing. But one of the good things, though, about organic produce, that yes, there is some contamination from the drift, but even when they test it, it's like 97, 98% pesticide free, which compared to,
compared compared to what? Yes.
yeah, compared to conventional where you're getting multiple pesticides and you don't even know if they put on uh, the proper formulas. And what can that happen very often, Tiffany, that people, when they mix up pesticides themselves, that from concentrates, that they're not doing it right?
Elaine, okay, let's start with when I was hired, I had no pesticide background. By law, it was a requirement that by the, let's see who has the authority over it. It's the California Department of Public Health. They have the authority under Title 17 of the California Code of Regulations. And the individuals employed by San Joaquin County or by any vector control district, they must carry a license to spray pesticides because the government is more lenient on the vector control districts because we are supposed to be more trained. But when I was hired there, I was hired with another gentleman. In my county, we had 19 zones. So we took our county and we broke it up into 19 sections. And two of us for 1 year we were not even trained or licensed. We should not have even been working out in the fields and spraying pesticides. So you bet. I mean, um, this is embarrassing, but I mean, like probably within my first 3 months, I actually sprayed a person with pesticides. Um, but they won't, they when they're liable, they won't document those things. Those things kind of lose themselves in a file because they knew that I wasn't licensed and they were liable. They start collecting that data after you're licensed. But not only were out of 19 um, territories, two were not licensed, we also had about 3 vacant zones from people that were injured or were not working there. So we were understaffed, undertrained while I was there. Then you talk about the doses and can there be a mix-up? Absolutely. One of the not it's not funny by any means, but one of the ironic things was that we were on a paper system, like everything was documented on paper records, which was really nice because those don't seem to disappear. But what they started to do is they started to integrate new computer systems. They wanted to put those out in the field with the technicians, and they never used the technicians to help create the programs. They would just create this program, and they would always want to administer this new format at the beginning of mosquito season. So not only were we trying to do our job, but we were also trying to learn a whole new computer system. And we would go out with these handheld devices, and we were supposed to record all the data, all the pesticide that we sprayed was supposed to go into these systems, and then they would not work. And so by law, we're supposed to report every month. We're supposed to have an annual reporting to the ag department. And how do you report spraying with computers that don't work? So we're putting in the data, we bring it back, and then when they shoot out the report, there's nothing there. We had about 5 of those computer systems, that handheld devices that we tried to implement within the time period that I worked there.
So I was just talking to the Department of Agriculture yesterday, and I know that they get reports from production and non-production. And when I had asked for what they get like for a year, I never heard anything about the vector departments.
Yeah, you won't hear much about vector. You won't hear much about vector from EPA. You won't hear much about vector from OSHA. Any governing agent, the way
because
that
no one governs them. There's no one watching them or checking their accountability. Not even the state. Does the state ever come out?
Well, okay, so I filed many complaints. I filed OSHA complaints. I actually had I had the Department of Toxic Pesticide Regulations come out and inspect. The grand jury came out, and they referred the findings to the district attorney's office, and nobody will touch them. They bring in so much revenue with their state of emergency that so what happens is our state, California, I find to be very corrupt, and our state they want their money in the coffers. They put their hands out for the federal funding, and so if OSHA governs so by law, if there's any injuries at work, my employer is required by law to inform OSHA.
And OSHA is like, let's, in case people don't know what OSHA is, Tiffany, that's like the governing body that makes sure that people have safe working conditions. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And they have very strict and stringent guidelines when it comes to pesticides. Like an employer, I will have to pull aside, and we will go through the OSHA standards verbatim. But just off the cuff, the employer is required by law, if we go to see the doctor at all for any workers' comp, for any injuries at work, the employer is, even if it's first aid, because it's related to pesticides, by law they are required to report it to OSHA. My employer does not report anything to OSHA. And then when I actually contacted OSHA, they do not enforce their own laws that are on the books.
Is that from lack of staffing? Maybe there's just not enough people to go out there, or they know. I'll just share really quick one incident that I went through that demonstrated I had the same conclusion you did, Tiffany, and that was when I was in Hawaii. There was an infestation going around of cucumbers with E. coli, and it was several states. And I went out to dinner and I ate cucumbers, and I had a horrible pain that was like nonstop for days. And I called the health department in Hawaii, and they lied to me about different things. They lied to me saying that they grow most of their food, and that's a total lie because they actually import most of their food. And then he said that there was like no other, cases. So he pretty much, what I figured out after talking to him, he did not want to report my case because then Hawaii looks like, oh, there's food poisoning happening in Hawaii, which could impact tourists.
Right.
They're announcing it. Oh yeah, we found an infestation in Hawaii, and people are like, oh my God. And then it probably triggers a whole cascade of different things because even one case.
I'm surprised because Hawaii, in all my research trying to find like-minded people, somebody who cares about pesticide poisoning, Hawaii seemed to be the front runner of we do not want
this was the health department, Tiffany. It wasn't,
right.
It had nothing to do with the pesticides. So
this is what I found. Well, first of all, okay, OSHA has laws. They have, you even have like a code that this is code such and such of the federal regulations. So my big question is, okay, when I'm reading their rules and what they are to enforce, it says an employer must. Okay, so when it says must, that's not a suggestion. That's supposed to be, something that it's a rule. But if OSHA is not going to do their job, and if they're not going to enforce their own laws, then why do they exist?
Well, that explains why they're not raising a red flag, the fact that particular vector department had not reported any problems. Because I would think that would be an exception to the rule. I would think that, of course, there's going to be problems and accidents that happen on the job.
You would think as a pesticide applicator that the idea of getting pesticide poisoning is not like a far stretch. I mean, it's part of the hazard of the job. It even says it on the labels. But OSHA has never taken seriously that there's a few elements that OSHA should be looking at the vector control. One is that this agency does not report any injuries, period. Two, that the agency, all that OSHA would have to do is go to the workers' comp board and look and see how many filings for workers' comp claims there are for the vector control district, like I did, and you will see that each one of those should have had they should have reported it to OSHA, but they didn't. So OSHA should just by default go into those go into the workers' comp board and pull out those filings, and they should be fining Vector for not reporting those.
Who does this hurt, Tiffany? When the system isn't working like it's supposed to, OSHA's not doing their job. They're not the Vector department isn't reporting these accidents to employees. Who gets hurt when that happens?
Everyone. First of all, the front line, the employees. I've had a coworker die at the age of 59 from being poisoned to formaldehyde without his permission or without his knowledge. One employee was bleeding from his esophagus at the workplace multiple times, where the fire department had to respond, and our employer did not report it. See, my employer, they think they're doctors, so they like to diagnose people. So they kind of cut out the middleman. They don't really need anybody else, as they are self-governed. they do believe that they're doctors. And so the guy bleeding from his esophagus, they just said that that was from Agent Orange from when he was in Vietnam. Um, Even though the correlation of his side effects go right along with the formaldehyde use.
And was there a history before he worked at the vector department of nosebleeds?
It wasn't nosebleeds. It was bleeding from his esophagus.
Oh, yeah, bleeding from his esophagus. Did he have a history before he even worked there?
We have not, him and I have never talked. Okay, so how did I find out about the formaldehyde being used for 10 years without any employees?
Because that's not something that you normally use at the vector department.
That is not something that they ever reported to the public, to the ag department, on their NPEDS permit, which means in order to operate as a business, they have to report that. It's a federal regulation. No, it was never reported on their NPEDS permits. Not from what I just learned on one of my trips. Not all vector controls use any aquaculture products on their fish, because the fish are indigenous to the wild. The fish are made to be, they're scavengers. They don't even need to be raised.
So this was an aquaponic. There's an aquaponic system at the vector department that they put fish in the sewage water because they help to clean the water.
No, that's not. No, you've got it a little backwards.
Okay,
what happened,
explain.
What I believe is, this is the way I understand it. Our city has the sewer, has our White Slough water facility treatment plant. And, there's a lot of regulations with sewage and what you can and cannot do with it. So a great alternative for our sewer plant out at the White Slough facility was to allow the vector control to create these. I think there's 13 fish rearing ponds out there, and it's non-potable water that they use. So what's happening is that the water is not healthy. The water itself was creating funguses and bacteria on our fish because it's not clean water, it's non-potable water. And mind you, Elaine, me as an employee was required to work in these trap ponds on a daily basis. We'd have to take a 100-foot seine and we'd have to, pull the fish out of the ponds. So the reason why they were using all these products, the aquaculture products, was because they are not using the proper water. They're not, the water. It all starts from bad management, from bad decisions, from bad.
So there's something in the system that isn't actually releasing water into the aquaponics system that isn't at the level of cleanliness it's supposed to be. So they're like shortcutting the filtering.
Correct. But I don't mean to cut you off.
No.
But it's not an aqua system. They are earthened ponds, which means that everything that they are putting into those ponds is leaching into the ground, and anything that is west of I-5 is below the water table. So it's already in the water system, not to mention that it's going in the ponds, but now it's below the water level.
Well, explain to people what formaldehyde is, because as a pesticide applicator that works with these different chemicals, you understand. I mean, people may think of it as like, oh yeah, that's what the mortician uses to embalm people. What is she talking about putting it in water?
To preserve dead people. They don't use it on life. I've learned a lot about formaldehyde and formalin out of a necessity. So my employer did not tell me like required by law. The district attorney, actually the grand jury contacted me and told me the district attorney wanted to talk with me, and I had filed a complaint with the grand jury about mismanagement and about sexual harassment and hostile work environment. And an apathetic board. So I had no idea about this criminal aspect of poisoning the employees.
But we have 2 minutes, Tiffany. So,
okay, there's no way I will be. The formaldehyde that they used was 37% formaldehyde mixed with a methanol gas, methyl alcohol gas.
And so I think since we only have a couple minutes left, I want to get into this whole formaldehyde issue because I know that's happening other places too, like the salmon containment pens. They're also dumping formaldehyde in the pens for the lice problem.
And they're saying that it's fine, but let's revisit the formaldehyde and.
Well, we'll start there next
Okay.
week. Well, are you next week is election, so we're going to skip that week.
No, I can go ahead.
Okay, you can make it next week.
Yes, I will. And what I want to say was today is my my boss. He died at age 59. His son lost both of his parents as a result of the things that have gone on with this district. His name is Jake. I want to wish Jake a happy birthday, and just I want to honor his parents. And I thank you so much, Elaine, for this platform.
Well, I know, Tiffany, one of the reasons you're here is you're concerned about all the employees that are still working at this vector department. So I really appreciate you coming on, and we'll just try to sort through all this and get the information out, and maybe we can start problem solving.
Perfect.
Well, okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Smart Health Talk. I'm your host, Elaine McFadden. Please find us on social media. We're posting all the time new information that you probably haven't heard of, because we dig deep for the real truth, right? And that's what we try to bring you. And I hope that you learned something today about your bodies and how maybe to control your diet and start on a weight loss program, and maybe you can replicate some of my success. And